Okay, we're gonna start here in just a second. We're going live.
I think then all this stuff.
Is that good? Should I put it up?
Then you kind of see all this stuff.
No.
I can't see from honestly. She's like recording. I didn't say.
Okay, we are now live and I think we are going to get started. Perfect. Okay, bonjour, hello everyone. I'm Tina MacDonald of the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe and the Communication Specialist at the American Indian Cancer Foundation. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of our World Food Day event. During this session, we're joined by Chef Elena Terry. Elena is the executive chef and founder of Wild Berries, a nonprofit community outreach catering organization. She is also the food and culinary program coordinator for the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance. Elena started as a traditional and ceremonial cook, but is also a trained chef who loves to challenge herself by executing multi-course plated meals. As a seed to table chef, Elena advocates for Indigenous and organic growers and producers. She utilizes her partnerships with the Intertribal Agricultural Council, University of Wisconsin, several tribal farms, and her own farm to provide and preserve ancestral ingredients in her community. One of her passions is developing mentorship programs that help build stronger communities within Indigenous food sovereignty movement, while empowering participants and establishing healthy food relationships. I will go ahead and plug her website into our comments so you in the audience can check out her page and support her work. And with that, I will turn it over to Elena. Welcome, thank you for being here today. What are you making for us today?
Hello, Haini P, Haini Karagiwi, Hochank Rajada, Hahe Mani Wenga Hingaire, Naga Maikade Rajada, Elena Terry. So I want to greet you a good day. My name is Elena Terry. I want to make sure that you can hear me. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today was wild rice. We are going to be doing a wild rice and root vegetable, raw vegetables. I kind of like to call it the roasted and root wild rice salad. And so one of the things that I did first was start soaking this wild rice, and I want to get that cooking as soon as possible. It's been rinsed several times and now it's soaking. So I'll be able to put it in some of our water that we have on the stove here. I'll get that going. One of the reasons that I wanted to do this with the American Indian Cancer Foundation and on World Food Day is because one of the things that I talk about a lot is food is medicine, and how that our foods, our Indigenous foods, really do nourish your spirit. And using them, we connect to more than just like a mindless eating or driving through a drive-through somewhere. We're actually going and being stewards of the land, cultivators of these ancestral seeds, or going out and spending time harvesting stuff like this incredible wild rice. And one of the things that I like to talk about when I talk about this particular wild rice is where I source it from. As an Indigenous chef, we don't have the luxury of always being able to go out and get something readily available. This wild rice is something that I plan for a year in advance. And I talked to the person, a good buddy of mine that goes out and rices with his grandsons every year, and they traditionally process this rice. And I think every time that I use this rice of Jack and his grandsons going out and taking the time to do this in a good way with a good heart. And I just love using this rice. I love the stories that are behind the ingredients and thinking of all of the mindful prayers and thoughts, those actions, the knowledge sharing that happens when we source these ingredients from those people, that all of those feelings and good intention goes into our meals too. So it affects us differently. It does feed more than our spirit. And I think in times like this, especially with what we're facing in the world, that reconnecting with our foods and really being mindful of every meal or where we get our ingredients is crucial, because it does connect our communities and it does nourish us a little bit differently. So I'm going to get this rice on the stove, and this is 2 cups of rice to 4 cups of water. I'll see, because sometimes it varies a little bit. I'll just keep checking it as it's going and show you what it needs to look like afterwards. If you can ever get like hand cultivated, traditionally processed rice, definitely do that. But if you can get it from the communities where it is processed, if you can reach out to tribal producers and get those kinds of products instead of the cultivated rice, I'd always recommend doing that. But if that's all you can get is cultivated wild rice, it still has some of the flavors, definitely not all of the flavor of, traditionally harvested wild rice, but it's getting those flavors into your diet and getting your palate used to those flavors, that the transitions will soon start to change to wanting to know those flavors a little bit more. So I know that in part 1 of the chef series, we had Chef Crystal Wapipaw, who's a good friend of mine, and I loved watching her chef demonstration. And she knows how much I absolutely love squash. So as we're talking, I'm just going to work on a couple of these things, and I'll let you know as we go along. I have this beautiful Delicata squash here, and I kept this half in place just so you can see how beautiful those seeds are. But I picked that up. It was a gift along my Honoring Our Farmers, Foragers, Growers, and Producers tour that I did with the Intertribal Agriculture Council and American Indian Foods program. And I was able to pick up some of these incredible ingredients so that I could save the seeds. And so as a Indigenous chef, I also kind of just naturally become a seed saver, because we are the last ones to have these ingredients before they are, consumed, and we harvest a lot of the seeds. So one of the things that we do is make sure that we preserve those seeds and we get them back out in our communities so that we can continue to grow in a good way. So I'm going to slice this side of the delicata, which I've scooped of the seeds and peeled. And I am going to marinate these thin strips in a little bit of maple syrup, because I always like having a little bit of sweet to counteract the savoriness of some of these salads. And it kind of tricks your palate a little bit, but it also enhances those flavors. And I don't like to manipulate our Indigenous flavors too much, but I like to complement each other with them and kind of enhance it by throwing in something like a sweet candied squash to complement. So I've cut them around that thin to kind of put them in my maple syrup here, and then put them on a parchment lined baking sheet that's going into a 350-degree oven. And it's not going to take that long. I just really want that maple to kind of caramelize on top of this delicata squash. So as I'm doing that, I'll say squash is one of my favorite ingredients. And I really think that it's underutilized because it's a little intimidating, right? Like a lot of people have had squash casserole or sometimes tried maybe one squash, or acorn squash is really popular, especially this time of year, and it's delicious. But there are so many different varieties of squash and so many different ways that you can eat it, that I absolutely love how versatile it is and how incredibly nutritious it is also. I mean, it's really high in vitamins, and you can use it as a sweet, as a savory. Today we're going to use it both ways, and we're using winter squash and summer squash. So I just have these on my baking sheet here, and I'm going to pop these in the oven. And when we talk about roasted roots and vegetables, you normally think of, maybe a red potato or a russet potato, maybe a carrot, and carrots are always delicious to add. But I also like to add color in other ways. So a sweet potato is a great root to put in with this salad. And then instead of using just your white starchy potatoes, always try and cook with color. And that's a beautiful Adirondack blue potato. And it's got so much more flavor and different flavor than a white potato. I'm going to cut this open just so you can see a little bit of how incredibly beautiful that is when it first gets cut. And then as it roasts, it gets a little bit more vibrant. I'm going to dice these up with the sweet potato and the carrot and toss them in with just a little bit of sunflower oil and salt. And the salt that I use is smoked salt. I get my smoked cedar salt directly from Sakari Farms, which has this amazing cedar or nasturtium smoked salt. I think they have pinon too. It's just a better way to add that little bit of flavor and make the salt go farther. So you use significantly less when you have that extra flavor. And it also gives it this wonderful woodsy umami taste that complements the wild rice and like the earthiness of the root vegetables too. So I have my purple potatoes and my sweet potatoes here. Really, you can use any vegetables that you like. This is my favorite combination for this time of year, but I also like to add a little bit of fresh vegetables, which we'll get to add some crunch and just texture variety. But you can add eggplant or rutabaga, beets, anything that you like that would add color and flavor. This is a salad that really kind of complements all of that together. So when I cook in the kitchen, I was thinking about my grandma a lot today because she left from after a long battle with cancer. And I was thinking about some of the things she talked about when we were in the kitchen or when we would be out foraging. These past few days, I've been remembering like going out and getting specific things with her during certain times of the year. And her really emphasizing that knowledge needed to be shared and continued on and done in a good way. Like when you receive that knowledge, it's a responsibility to continue it on in a responsible and good way. That's the only way that we've been able to maintain these food systems as long as we have, like so that we're able to enjoy these flavors. But there are a lot of environmental issues that are affecting our food sources. And I think with everything that we're facing in our society as humans, not just as Indigenous people right now, when it comes to our food sources, we really do need to start getting back to our roots and learning how to feed ourselves, how to build towards food sovereignty, because it really is an issue. And I think because we do have so many other factors going on right now, it definitely is an issue of time and attention that we need to start addressing. And food is medicine in so many different ways. Like the act of growing your own food is very healing and grounding and rewarding when you're able to see what produces or what you have at harvest time. It's something that I advocate for a lot and I practice myself, and I can't tell you how much it significantly changed me as a person and the way that I mindfully eat a little bit better now. I mean, nobody's perfect and everybody has their days, but it's those small changes that really do add up in the long run. And just making slight changes. So we started around 3 years ago substituting out one meal a week with indigenous ingredients. And that one meal turned into 2 meals, turned into 3, turned into, if during every single meal we could add a little bit of our indigenous ingredients, we do, because it tastes so good. And the more you have it of them, like say blue corn, or the nuts that come off the trees in your region. I think here we have hazelnuts and acorns, walnuts. The more you get those natural flavors into your diet and the more you start appreciating them, the more you're going to want them and the more your body will respond to them. So here I have purple potatoes, sweet potatoes, and carrots, and I'm just going to put those on my sheet pan and get those in the oven too. So I cut them pretty small because you don't want them to overpower the bite of the wild rice. You kind of want to combine into a perfectly composed bite. I'm going to give this rice a stir. So because this is hand harvested wild rice, it takes a significantly less amount of time to cook, and that this is already starting to pop open. And I like my rice to be a little bit more open for this salad. I also have some other kinds of squash. I have a zucchini and the yellow summer squash. These I'm going to still roast, but I'm going to roast them. Actually, I think with the zucchini, one of the really interesting things that you can do, and it's one of my favorite ways to treat a zucchini, is to convection bake it on a little bit higher of a setting, and it crisps up the outside, but deliciously melts the inside. And I always call it my zucchini marshmallow. It came from a mistake, but ever since I made the mistake of burning the zucchini in the convection oven, I've loved the way the flavor turned out. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll put the zucchini aside, and because I want them to get a little bit more brown on the outside, I'm going to cut these slightly larger than what I did with the a little bit more dense root vegetables. And with the yellow summer squash, I'm going to thinly slice that. And at the last minute, I'll add that into the oven on a sheet pan, because that I want to mostly remain raw so that you can have a textural difference when you have those bites. I don't want everything to be softer, or I want some to have a little bit more of a texture to it. So this summer squash is a great way to add that without having an overpowering flavor. So I know Crystal was talking a little bit about how she became a chef, and in the introduction, we talked a little bit about me and being a traditional and ceremonial foods chef or cook in my community. But there was really this connection that I got. There was always thought put into cooking when you cook like that, when you cook for, your traditional doings or for something specific. And the mindset that you have when you cook like that is different, in that, you really do pray when you cook, and you cook with intention. And all of those feelings that you have when you're in the kitchen go into that food. And so when you're cooking for something, that's more spiritual, that's the way you need to be in the kitchen. And the desire to continue on and to be around our foods in those ways, not only in harvesting, but in preparing and enjoying these meals. For us, not even very long ago, it took a long time to travel to see each other, and that journey would take a toll on you. So when your family or friends would show up for a visit, it wouldn't be just, an hour or two. It would be a long visit. And I remember taking those long visits with my grandma when we would travel to see people, or my grandpa, and, knowing that we were going to stay for several days and really enjoy each other's company. When we would get there, they would always have this amazing meal set for us, like replenishing you from your journey. And when you start cooking with those intentions and that appreciation and those good feelings, you just want to do it more. You just naturally want to find more of these foods and to taste more of them and to be a part of that community. And every meal is appreciated a little bit more different. But we also have to be, as with anything else, incredibly responsible about the way that we source our ingredients. Like I mentioned before, we don't have the luxury of being able to go to the store and purchase these ingredients. Like you do have to go out to hunt for certain mushrooms or plants or seasonings. You do have to have things specifically grown for you if you want to have an ancestral corn or an ancestral squash. One of them I have here I wanted to share with you, which is my favorite squash. And it's a Pueblo Hubbard. And this squash was 2 years in the making, 3 years. So I got seeds from this at the Taos, New Mexico Southwest Intertribal Food Summit that the Intertribal Agriculture Council and the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance hosted. And they told me that I could save the seeds because it was the most delicious, amazing squash that I had ever seen or tasted, in my opinion. And I saved those seeds. Year 2, we grew out in 2 farms. And this year, we grew out in 4 farms. And so of those 4 farms, 3 got vine borer. And it was one of these environmental unforeseen things. And it took out our entire crop of squash. So from this one squash now, as we enter for getting ready for next year's grow, we have only 1 farm that produced a significant amount for seed. And so hopefully we'll be able to get that seed back out, take the precautions, but it's not something that's an instant fix. It's something that in order to get this squash, a lot of intention and care goes into it. The growers really making sure that once, things are in the ground that they're going to thrive, or what can we do to constantly be fixing the environment to make it better. So it's when you have the ingredients, when you are able to have a meal with indigenous foods, ancestral corn or bean or squash, it has been those acts that have been able to provide it now for us. And it's our mindfulness and appreciation that we have today that will make sure that those foods are available for our future, that my grandchildren will still be able to say, like, this was my grandma's favorite squash and we continued to grow it. If it wasn't done for us, we wouldn't have it. We wouldn't have that connection, not only to the food sources, but to the resiliency that comes with these ingredients. So that being said, our rice is done. And I want to show you before I rinse it, what it looks like. And you can see that it's opened, it's tender, and it didn't take a significant amount of time to cook. But I want to make sure now that it's at this stage where I want it, that I shock it a little bit, that I stop the cooking process, because if you overcook it at this stage, you're going to end up just with mush, and we don't want that. We want to be able to taste the bite of the rice when we have it. So give me a second to do that. All right. And I am going to
Actually. Hi, Elena. We have a
my
question.
summer squash in a bowl and toss it with a little bit of sunflower oil and also the zucchini, and get those ready to pop in the oven, because when I do put them in the oven, I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit. The root vegetables that I have going aren't going to take too much longer because we did cut them small. So I think I'll also check the candied Delicata here. So that's almost done. You can see it's got this nice softer texture and it's caramelizing really well. I'm just going to flip these really quick and then put them back in the oven. And I'm not adding anything other than the maple syrup to these at this point. When they are finished, I might add a little bit of the smoky salt to it just to make sure that that flavor kind of pops, but you don't want very much at all. And when I say a little bit, it's like 2 grains. And I'll just give you a look to see how amazing these roasted vegetables look. And I'm going to quick give those a stir and then put them back in the oven too. So a yellow pepper, I mean, this is what I always love to add to give it that little fresh crunch and to make sure that you really kind of blend the flavors together with a pop. So I'm going to rinse this. And then just dice this up to kind of the same size as the root vegetables, but a little bit smaller, just a tad bit smaller. Those are going to kind of soften up and melt down in your bite, and you want to add this as a little extra. So I also like to mix up a dressing for the wild rice salad, just because it's a wonderful way to tie all of the flavors together. And I was thinking about this salad today and what we might want to use for it. I don't know if everybody's made a salad dressing before, but it's really easy and it's not very intimidating once you've done it once. You can even do it by shaking together some of the ingredients in like a mason jar, which is what we're going to do today, just so that you can see how easy it is to do. Let me grab a mason jar. So I'm going to add some of our maple syrup. And then I'm lucky enough to have this amazing crew in Michigan that makes maple vinegar for me. So I am going to add a little bit of maple vinegar. And when I say a little bit, so this is a pint jar, and I just have a little bit of the maple syrup, a little bit of the maple vinegar in there. A tiny little bit of salt, and that's just a little pinch. And then the other day I went to one of my garden partners, Alice's garden in Milwaukee, and I was able to get some of the nasturtium leaves, and we dehydrated those, and that's got this wonderful peppery flavor that's like a natural, like leafy pepper flavor. And I'm going to add just a little bit of that to it. It's not quite as overpowering, and it does add a little bit of freshness. And then a little bit of our sunflower oil. I will give this just a tiny bit of shake now to get it started. And then add just a little bit more oil. Like you want to get that emulsification process started a little bit, and then add a little bit more and give it a nice good shake to to really get it to be your salad dressing on top. Now you could add any flavors that you want. And since, I have maple vinegar because I love maple, but you could use pear, apple cider vinegar, red wine vinegar, anything that you prefer as far as flavor. And you can add whatever seasonings you'd like to it too. Say shallots or garlic. I like roasted garlic sometimes just because it gives it a little bit deeper of a flavor. But after a little bit of a shake, you can see that you have your really nice consistency and the seasonings are kind of floating in there well. So we're going to use that as our salad dressing once we plate this. I'm going to quick finish cutting up this bell pepper so that we can add that in the end. And one of the other things that I absolutely love when I'm foraging or even with cultivating is using like the beauty of the food around us. So we're going to garnish this salad with some of our dried flowers. We have dried squash blossoms from Sakari Farms. And then I also have some of these incredible dried sunflowers that my sister and I happened to find a wild sunflower patch. And over the course of a week, several of us went out and harvested and dried these sunflowers. So yeah, one of the things that I haven't really touched on was the responsible foraging. And we really always have to talk about that because these ingredients are here because people have been responsible kind of in the past with them. But the way that we need to ensure that they will be here for our future is by everybody taking a step to act as stewards of the land, to make sure that the environment where these wild foods thrive in continues to be maintained. The wild prairies that produce these incredible sunflowers, or the plants that add these incredible flavors that you can't mimic by other ingredients. We really need to make sure that the environment that we have them in now continues to be conducive for them to thrive, because they really are incredible food sources. And when you are foraging, make sure that you're foraging in places where one, it's allowed and legally, that you're not taking more than what you can process or consume, and that you're doing it in a way that you're leaving enough of it behind that it'll continue to thrive in that environment or that space, and really making sure that you're respectful of those rules. Let me check, because I think our root vegetables are done. So I'm going to put those aside. And then I'm just going to go ahead and use the same sheet pan because it does have a little bit of that sunflower oil on it still, and put in the zucchini and the summer squash. Well, I'll put the zucchini in on this one and the summer squash in on something after. And I turned my oven on convection, and I turned the heat up so that that zucchini will kind of get a blast when it's in there. And I have the wild rice here that's been cooled and rinsed. And you can see it's still a little warm, but it's got this wonderful consistency. So we can go ahead and get things started to plate here. I love using our wooden bowls for this meal. And I'm going to put the rice down first. Add my roasted root vegetables. Maybe maybe one of you guys could come and show them. So my daughter's right here and she's gonna try and take the camera here a little bit so that you can see what is going on in the bowl here. I know Crystal was talking about some of our natural herbs and seasonings. So here you go. You can see a little bit what's going on. I have our raw peppers and then our roasted root vegetables also. And I'm going to give that a nice mix. Just a tiny bit more of these leaves. Like I said, when it comes to seasonings, it's really up to you on what you want and what you prefer. But definitely try it, because I mean, there's seasonings that I don't like, and there's certain foods that I don't like, but it's always worth trying, because some of the things that you would never imagine are the most incredibly delicious that you'll come across. So I'm actually going to, it's warm enough that I'm just going to go ahead and add some of the summer squash raw also, because it is a squash that can easily overcook or get lost once it starts getting past that point of being al dente. It'll just really kind of mush apart. Now you can also add corn to this, or one of the things we like to add is beans also, and make it kind of a Four Sisters salad. At harvest time, you can also get the smaller sunflower heads and roast them on the grill, and they taste incredible, like this amazing sweet and corny, not sweet corn, but sweet and corny taste. They're incredible. And you can even get some of those at the farmers markets when you go. Now's the best time to kind of scoop up whatever's left at those markets and get the most flavorful ingredients. Our candied squash is done, so I'll pull that out. I don't know if you can see it. It doesn't look like very much, but the flavor that's in this is incredible. And if you haven't had the delicata before, it's a delicious squash. I definitely recommend it. I mean, I recommend all squash because it's so good and it's my favorite, but this delicata's got a very unique, gentle flavor, and it's very good for the sweet, adding sweet to a dish. So with my delicata strips, I'm just kind of rough chopping those, and that's one of the wonderful things about having your organically shaped ingredients, because you're going to end up with organically shaped cuts, but it all kind of goes together in the end. So I just kind of slightly chop those, and I'm going to add those on top of the salad. You could add sliced red onion if you'd like. You could add dried fruit and nuts, which sometimes we like to do. Add dried cranberries, or you could even do sunflower seeds, or if you're lucky enough to have somebody that can get you those delicious piñons that I think just got harvested. You could add those too, because those are incredible with the wild rice salads. Like I mentioned before, beets, which is a superfood. It's incredible. And you can get beets that aren't as earthy flavored, and you can get beets that have a really strong earthy flavor if that's what you like. I think it's all up to a person's taste, but you definitely should try them, because even a simple roasting in the oven with a little bit of olive oil or sunflower oil completely transforms the flavor of a beet. Or a pickle, sometimes it's good when you have heavier flavors to make sure you have acid, which is part of the reason why we added to our salad dressing some of that maple vinegar to give that acid and really draw that flavor out. I'm going to give these guys a quick toss and then they'll be just about ready. But I love how vibrant they get, and it's really quick that it happens with the zucchini. So I am going to toss our salad dressing here on the wild rice with everything. And just give it a good stir to coat it in. So the wild rice will definitely absorb. This is one of those salads that it's better if you have it warm or if you have it cold, which you can do, and it's still pretty delicious if you eat it cold. If you eat it cold, make it the day before so that that flavor has a chance to really penetrate and marry well with the wild rice. But if you mix the dressing in while it's a little warm and you serve it warm, it's going to really have that wonderful, not just coated, but where the wild rice just kind of sucks it in a little bit. So I have this here. And I have some of these squash blossoms that I'm going to put on top too, because it does give it this different kind of flavor. So these are just dried squash blossoms, dehydrated. And then I kind of have these at a stage where they're getting a little bit more powdery and not quite solid, but they still have this incredible flavor of like a squash, but green too, like a leafy flavor. I'm going to add some of these sunflowers to the top. And another thing that I wanted to say about when we talk, like when food is medicine and when you go out and harvest your food or forage, to make sure that you do it with somebody who knows what they're doing, or that you have resources where you're not going to get something that isn't edible or that might hurt you in the end, because there are some doppelgangers out there. There are some common misidentifiers out there. And as you're exploring different food sources, make sure that you do it in the most responsible way. I mean, I know that that's a given, but if it's something that you're just starting to get exposed to a little bit, it's something that definitely needs to continue to be said. So for people's own safety, as you're exploring different food cultures in whatever way, make sure that you do it in a responsible way and that you are educating yourself properly on that so that you don't, adversely affect yourself from it. So we just have to get our zucchini here, and you can see that it is getting nice and brown. I'd like to take it a little bit farther than this usually, but this is actually a perfect bite where there's just a little bit of resistance on it, but not a significant amount. It still has some texture and the flavor hasn't been affected too much, but you have this wonderful golden brown outside that gives this kind of, like I said, marshmallowy flavor on the inside. So I'll add that in to my salad here. give you a look. At how it turned out. And it's incredible. We'll probably finish this with just a little bit of our smoked cedar salt. And I just make sure that this rice is cooked. It's delicious. It's got this mapley flavor, but there's still this earthy flavor, this light pepper flavor, a floral. There's the crunch from the summer squash, and then this creaminess from the root vegetables. It's definitely a dish that you can try at home, and you should try at home. So yeah, there we go. I'm not sure if there's any questions or not.
Hi, Elena. There definitely are some questions here. Thank you for sharing with us. The first question we have is, what does it mean to let the rice open?
So this is the grain. Let me see if I can. This is the grain of raw rice, so it's solid. When you're letting the rice pop open, that's literally what it does. It opens up. I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but the rice will kind of bend and one seam will open up. And when that happens, that's where I like to eat my rice. And you have to be careful because with certain kinds of rice, with wild rice too, if you don't cook it enough, it does have a hard time digesting. So you want to make sure that you get it to a stage where it's not crunchy anymore on the inside.
Great, thank you. How would you store and eat this meal for leftovers? What would be the best way to do that?
So this meal would be fine going right in the refrigerator. And then if you prefer warm, it would just be a quick warm up either in a pan or, if you have to microwave it. Otherwise, this salad is really delicious cold the next day too. And if you eat it, I prefer eating it warm the first day and cold the second day because those flavors have a chance to really blend in and then it's not hard to transport. So that's actually what we do. We always just pack our lunch from the dinner the night before.
Great, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your native food sovereignty work?
Yes. So I work as the Food and Culinary Program Coordinator for the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance. And in that position, I coordinate the culinary cohorts, the chef mentorship program, and I work with 120 Indigenous chefs throughout the Americas in a mentorship program where really the philosophy is not ego-based, but the only way that we're going to make progress in this movement is if I share as much knowledge in a responsible way where you're going to retain it and get you to where I'm at, and then do as much as I can to get you further and support you in that process. And right now is a time where we really need to continue to make progress in the food sovereignty movement. As I mentioned, I also have partnerships with the Intertribal Agriculture Council, the American Indian Foods Program, and the University of Wisconsin Horticulture, along with several tribal farms, where I work on seed multiplication, sustainable agriculture, supporting economically as a chef, the Indigenous producers that are in our communities, working to continue to be able to provide these products and ingredients and incredible flavors to our community, our families, and beyond, really the communities that we live in. So right now, one of my main goals is to get responsible production increased so that we can use them as these ingredients as chefs, but that we can, first of all, feed our families, feed our communities, and then be able to share and educate. But I really believe that the more we talk about these ingredients and the more we are respectful and get people to treat them in a wonderful and protective way, the better chance they have at sustaining in the long term and really being able to be used for nourishing more than just your body.
Great, thank you. How do you preserve your seeds?
It depends on the seed, really. Some of the seeds I care for, some of the seeds I send to my seed saver. Once I'll get them to a certain stage. So like for our squash seeds, this is what I did so far. But I'll take them out of the pulp and rinse them and, make sure that they're cared for. And then once I get them to a stage where they can be dried, then we'll store them for the winter and then get those distributed. When it comes to certain corns, I keep them here, but I also braid some with the seed savers that I work with and keep them there. As far as the squash goes, with like this Pueblo Hubbard, I'll keep these. I'll rinse them kind of the same way that I did with the Delicata, lay them out, winnow them, and really care for them to make sure, because I know that this is something that I don't have very much access to, and I need to make sure that I'll have some that will grow next year. And it's really a matter beyond that also. Like these seeds have had their own journeys and have brought us together in different ways throughout history. And when you say an ancestral seed, they've had their own journey, their own struggle, but they also carry deep resilience and strength. And when you care for them from one year to the next to make sure that that continues, there has to be a lot of thought and prayer and mindfulness in doing that, and even in storing them so that you make sure that they're completely dry, so not one seed will mold or start that process with any of the other ones. And it's really caring for them in a way so that they can build up that nutrition and that nourishment and be prepared to grow and thrive for the next year as they slumber on the off season. So there's a lot that goes into it, but there are a lot of resources on where you can learn how to do those things. And like I said, as a chef, I'm a natural seed saver, but I also know that I am a chef. So I do put some of those seeds that are a little bit more high importance in making sure that they're able to multiply the following year in the hands of the seed savers to take care of for me.
Great, thank you. Okay, this next question is a little bit loaded. What is your favorite and least favorite part about being a chef?
Oh, my favorite part of being a chef is the community. Like being a chef and being in the kitchen and that environment is one where if you're willing to do the work and you're willing to do it in a good way, you can be successful. And that brought me back from places where I was not successful. And going into a kitchen and having that drive and the pace of the heat, the choreography of movement, all of it is incredible. And if you've ever been in a kitchen on a Saturday night, with a full rail in the weeds, you would know what I'm talking about. It's a feeling that is kind of unexplainable, and being able to finish and accomplish those things at the end of the night is very rewarding. Being an Indigenous chef is all that and then some. Like having those connections, not only with the kitchen and the movement and temperatures and processes, but I also am a butcher and a pit master and a wild game specialist, and I appreciate all of the food systems that we have, and being able to make that connection with life and the continuation of our life from these food sources is the next level. It's a wonderful and rewarding way to be able to work. So I'm grateful every day that I have this, and my friends, the community, the food, the whole system, the traditional knowledge. I mean, I personally couldn't ask for a better place to be in my life.
Thank you so much, Elena. We are approaching our time limit, so I will ask you one final question and have you do some closing remarks if you wish. So, will you be sharing the recipe with us?
I don't even remember what I just did. No, I'm kidding. I can definitely write down the recipe and share it with you if you'd like to post it.
Yes, definitely. We would love to do that. Do you have any final words or comments for us?
Yes. I mentioned this is a way that we stay connected. And once you start treating food as medicine and you do more mindful eating, nobody's perfect, but making those small changes significantly make changes for the next generation. And as a parent, as a member of my community, and as a proud Indigenous woman, I feel like if all of us make those small changes, we can really pave the way for a stronger tomorrow, for our future. That these foods that have helped us endure and be resilient and be stewards of the land and held accountable for our actions today are available for our future, then our work here would be something to be proud of. So I encourage all of you to make those small changes and really stay connected with your food, nourish yourself and your family, and don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions. And that's where sharing that knowledge really does become power. So thank you for tuning in and for sharing my kitchen with me and this meal. It's been a real blessing. Thank you for having me be a part of this presentation, the American Indian Cancer Foundation.
Thank you so much, Elena, for having us in your kitchen today. We really appreciate it. For you in the audience, if you have any more questions, feel free to contact us at prevention@acap.org or visit our website, americanindiancancer.org. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.